Hey, peace world. Thanks for pressing play on another Pay Me No Mind sports and entertainment video. My name is Wood. Let's jump right into some bite down boxing talk. I saw where writer, podcaster, boxing journalist Michael Woods had a rather friendly article on Ring Magazine with Bob Arum of Top Rank. Yes, he's the CEO of Top Rank. Just celebrated his 89th birthday, and that's what this article was kind of about. But they also took a turn into like what's the state of boxing, and then they got into the numbers for Bob Arum's numbers for the pay-per-view buys for last week's Spence versus Errol Spence Jr. Unified title defense, welterweight title defense against Danny Garcia. And I just have some questions. I'm really not trying to state what I know. I'm more or less trying to start the discussion and pose a couple of questions and go from there. Got some questions about Mayweather, his influence on pay-per-view buys, Manny Pacquiao, looking forward with potentially with fights with Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. And then, a question about Porter and how he comes into play. So let's start with this, with Bob's information, with his numbers. In the article, Bob says, or Michael Woods reports that Bob Arum said probably 125,000 buys were activated. And a couple sentences later, he says they wanted about 300,000. I just saw some other. That's the thing. We haven't seen any numbers come out this week, and it's Thursday. It's Thursday after the fight. We haven't seen any numbers come out. So there's no articles from any of the major, the bigger outlets. So we don't know. And I'm saying I don't know. I'm not so sure I buy Bob's number. I'll also throw this caveat out there. I did not purchase the fight. I was amazed Saturday night to sit here and see that the cat was on YouTube live streaming the fight, receiving super chats and Cash App donations to broadcast the fight. And I felt kind of good about my decision to sit this one out. And that's going to be my position moving forward. I'm not paying for fights that I don't want to see. I was in the chat, in the live chat during the press conference, one of the press conferences or the weigh-in or something. Oh, it was the undercard press conference for on the PBC channel. And I just sat and watched the chatters talking themselves into believing that this was a great undercard and that set of fights was great value. I didn't say nothing. I didn't knock it. Hey, that's really not my business. I sat this one out. You can't give me Sebastian Fundora against Jorge Cota, who ended up being Habib Ahmed or something, who got knocked out in the second round. But you can't I can't pay that for $75 and look at myself in the morning in the mirror. But let's look at that $125,000 buys as just like the lowest number possible. I saw somewhere else, I'm not even going to mention the website because I'd never heard of it before, but you can Google it and see it. They reported the split as 60-40 for Spence and Danny. And they reported the guarantees as $1.5 million for Spence and $1 million for Danny. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. And that's the thing when we get in. This is why I don't engage in a whole lot of this discussion, because we don't know. We don't know. But not the biggest guarantees. The guarantees are probably legit. 1.5 million and 1 million. That's been kind of consistent for this round robin of welterweights. But so this is what happens according to what I've been able to piece together the last couple of years. The pay-per-view was $74.95, I believe. From what I understand, the networks or the cable providers take half of the revenues of the buys. They take half of the total revenues from that. From what I understand, there are certain thresholds that if those thresholds are hit, they may take a lower percentage. If we're talking about less than 500, less than 350,000, I don't think any of those thresholds are activated, and there's no discount given. It is what it is. They take 50%. And then there's, Danny and Spence and Danny split the TV money. And if the 60-40 is true, then let's go from there. So even if we look at 125,000 buys, if we look at 180,000 buys, if we look at 200,000, if we look at 250,000, if we look at 300,000, we're looking at a range of total revenues for 125,000 is like $9.4 million. If it was 300,000 buys, it was $22.4 million. So you can start in the middle, you can be in the middle there. You can be at around 200,000 or 225,000. You can use whatever you want to use. But we're still talking about, I'm going to stay around 200,000. That means the total revenues were about $14.9 million. After cable takes its cut, that brings it down to about $7.5 million. And then Spence and Danny would split that 60-40. So Spence would get 4.4 million, 4.5 million. Danny would get 2.9 or 3 million. So then you add that to their guarantee of 1.5 and 1 million even. It's not a bad night for those guys. But my question becomes, and this isn't no school, Harvard School of Business or Stanford School of Business discussion right here, but there's something called an opportunity cost. It's defined as the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. So what I'm bringing that up to ask, like, how many of these fights can Spence go to if there's a rematch next with a Porter? If that's the direction they go in, if these rumors of Manny wanting to fight Spence, that's a different discussion. But what alternatives do Spence and the PBC really have to continue to make this work versus the two parties coming together, Top Rank and Crawford and Spence/PBC versus them coming together and hashing this out, working this out. Arum goes on into the piece to say that, with the license fee that the PBC gets to put this fight together, plus these revenues and the splits to the fighters, the cost of the fight, like they're losing money on this thing. How many more times do they want to lose money on this or barely break even or whatever? How many times do you want to do this before you realize that you got to put on a better fight, a better card? Like there's the economy is jacked up, the pandemic situation. However you want to look at it, all the economic factors. Their choice to put that card on with Josecito Lopez and Chia Santana and Flores and I can't think of Flores and the cat that Ramirez that knocked him out. Those just weren't good fights to me. Santana had been slowing down. Now, to finish that off, there's also an opportunity cost in looking at this from Top Rank / Crawford's position, because if that is like I said, if this 60-40 was if this 60-40 to Danny is true, how could Crawford accept 40% moving forward in any negotiations? How could he do that if you gave that to Danny? But the question will become for Crawford, if you don't take the 40% split that Spence has stated, how many other fights can you go to and make the same amount of money for whatever that 40% is? Would you have to make a fight and a half? And like, what opponents can you even get to change the narrative on your legacy at this point that you keep trying to dispel with your own statements about what you've done? So I don't have a dog in this fight. I just want to know, when does the game dictate that everybody has to sit down and work this shit out? Because again, I'm not going in my pockets for fights that I don't want. Another factor here is the fact that is the reality that a week before, some people were, I don't even want to say the word duped, but some people bought into the Tyson fight with Roy Jones Jr. for $50. So to turn around a week later and spend another $75, but I mean, if I don't know how to explain none of this shit, but looking at Bob's statement, how bad could some of my questions, so I can get on off of here. How bad could Bob knock the PBC if he really wants to do business with them for Spence-Crawford? How if this is a potential business partner, we got to work together, and we just worked together on Wilder Fury 2, and nobody really came away from that situation, with the major impetus to do it again. And that's another thing, got to throw another caveat out there. Without the gate and without a timeline for when fans can return to fights, there's not going to be a serious discussion made anyway. Because from what I understand, the promoters get the gate. That's their take from putting on the fight. And then you get into the concessions and all that, sponsorships, blah, blah, blah. So that's another thing. There's no sense in cussing anybody out online, because this is the facts. But how bad could Arum speak of PBC if you really are going to go and sit down and have a true Spence-Crawford discussion to make that fight? So I don't know how off, because if he was really off with his numbers, his estimate, then when he went to call Al and the PBC, they would say, man, F out of here. You F out of here, man. You poisoned this fight for us. We're not interested. But if he said what he said and he called them and they were like, and they said F out of here, and he was like, but I was right. I knew what I was talking about. Then the PBC kind of has, to have a real conversation like, okay, well maybe, we didn't like you saying it. We didn't like you putting our business out there, but let's talk about this Spence-Crawford. Another question. Mayweather pushed the pricing of pay-per-views up to $75. We saw that the 1.5 or whatever million happened for Tyson Jones Jr., but that was at a price point of $50. They had the hip-hop shit in there and whatever else, some other fighters on there. Okay. So maybe that's part of the success. I've heard Steven Espinosa over at Showtime talk about he likes some promoters and some managers to consider going down to $50 or going down in the price to make it more appealing, to lure in more buyers. But Mayweather pushed this up from $59.99 or $64.99 or so. He pushed it up to the $75 price point. But my question is, wasn't that like platinum boxing? Like, that's Mayweather. That's a Mayweather event. How the hell did all these other cats get to jump on at that price point without the track record of building it up to that amount? And if your event in general, if you're not putting other world title fights and world title eliminators on the card, how the F do you come in at $75? That was, again, just completely disrespectful to the paying fan. Oh, I got a pay-per-view event. It's going to be $75. What have you done to earn that, though? It was a series of fights, really, truly bona fide marquee fights that allowed Mayweather to eventually jump out and go to that $75 price point. That wasn't where he started. Next question. If Manny could be discussed for Crawford, if they could have seriously been making that discussion earlier this year, and I know I have to believe that that discussion was being had because Jamel Herring called in. I did an interview on here with him, and he alluded to this fight. He couldn't share it. He didn't mention the name, but putting two and two together afterwards, I know who he was talking about. And everybody has said it. All the major people have said it at this point. So, again, if Manny was seriously being discussed for Crawford, why can't the Spence discussion happen? But I don't know what Manny's relationship is with PBC. Because Manny was also entertaining a fight with Garcia, who's independent. But that was rumored to be heading towards the zone. So these guys have a little bit of leeway. Some do. Last question. This whole notion with that Terrence Crawford should just fight Sean Porter. I don't totally disagree, but if he can't get Spence, you might have to do something to make a legit event, unless you're gonna fight the winner of Ramirez and Taylor. That may happen, but Porter as an opponent. Porter as an opponent, if I'm top ranked and we're gonna do this, we don't have a working relationship. It takes a lot to get us to make any one fight. If I'm top ranked, why would I be interested in engaging in getting this one shot at Porter? And Porter is who I get in this deal. Why would I want him? I mean, if you can get your emotions and what you want to badly see, if you can get that out of your mind for a minute, just explain to me that. Again, I don't have a dog in this fight, but you have to factor in the money here, because it comes to an opportunity cost again. Like, I can go fight the winner of Taylor and Ramirez and not pursue this Porter thing. I mean, everybody might not like that fight. You might not believe in a super lightweight coming up to welterweight for his first fight. You might not buy it, but it's a legit fight. It's a fairly legit fight, especially if one of those guys was to knock the other out and then come up to welter. I see Virgil Ortiz Jr. over there now talking about let him get Crawford. Is that a valid option for Crawford? In a way, that would work. It wouldn't be ideal to me, but it's a move that they can make. But again, unless there was some assurance given on Porter on making a Porter fight, which, like I said, I don't think they have that type of relationship. Like, we ain't trying to do this all the time. It's like you go to the store to buy some J's, some 10s or some 5s, and they're sold out, but they got like the fourth model of the Questions, Allen Iverson sneakers. And it may match your outfit that you want to rock that night. But you probably don't take those Questions. You just like, man, I keep searching for my J's and keep it pushing. But anyway, that's kind of looking through it. Was this all really worth it? How long can they stay away from the fight? Bite down boxing. Don't let them count you out.